Cross and Crescent. And we're fortunate to have with us Dr. AAl-Hadid and Dr. Baldwin. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, before we had our first commercial break, Dr. AAl-Hadid talked about the differences, quote unquote, between Malcolm and Martin. And I think he also indicated that there were more similarities between the two than differences, and that we've often heightened those differences. And let's have you to talk about those similarities.
Okay, I'd like to pick up where he left off. Malcolm and Martin are commonly viewed as leaders who stood on opposite extremes of the leadership spectrum. One author puts it, it's like two in a Manichaean contest, the forces of light against the forces of darkness. But as Dr. AAl-Hadid said, we are trying to show that the two men complemented each other, that they corrected each other, that they were influenced by each other, that they received impelling moral, spiritual, and intellectual power from each other. They came together around a lot of issues, such as the issue of class toward the end of Malcolm's life, dealing with the issue of economic injustice and how that relates to racial injustice. They came together on the South Vietnam issue, and American involvement in South Vietnam. They came together around the South African issue, South African apartheid. So we so often forget what they shared in terms of ideals because the images we get are of two men who were always in tension with one another and who was always standing on different ends of the spectrum. I think one scholar refers to Malcolm as King's ideological nemesis. And we get this kind of image, but we want to try and correct that, to show that if we bring about a creative synthesis of the insights and the ideals of both men, we can address a lot of problems in the contemporary world, such as religious bigotry and intolerance, racism, classism, economic injustice. I think both men spoke to these issues in similar ways. So there were many similarities despite the differences that we can point to.
Now, if you were to take both these individuals and place them in society today, and you talked about post-September 11th, 2001, what would be, according to the way the two of you saw these individuals in your book, what would be your perception in reference to that?
Certainly, from an Islamic point of view, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz would be diametrically opposed to those incidents.
Now, you make reference to Malcolm X as
Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. And I do that deliberately and intentionally because, as you know, he made the pilgrimage to Mecca and changed his name from Malcolm X to Malik al-Shabazz. And when you say Al-Hajj, it simply means that one who has made the pilgrimage. And so I like to think of him in that context because if you look at the surnames of all of his children, they're Shabazz. You look at the surname of his widow, who's now passed, who was also Betty Shabazz or Attila Shabazz, his daughter. So it's, you know, I'm trying to eliminate that contradiction. He can't be Malcolm X and his children and Shabazz and his wife is Shabazz and his passport says Shabazz, so it was Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. And so part of my contribution in the book was to present him as a Sunni Muslim and not a Nation of Islam Muslim. I mean, that was a stage in his life for about 18 years or so. But after he left the Nation of Islam, that's the point at which he gained universal consciousness. That's the point at which he started concerning himself with humanitarian issues, which brought him a lot closer to Dr. King. It was his ideology in the Nation of Islam that alienated him from Dr. King. And so as he became more humanitarian and more universal and international, he became closer and closer to Dr. King. Whether people realize it or not, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz was nonviolent. And when he used the term by any means necessary, he was not using it in a Machiavellian sense of letting the ends justify the means. He was just simply saying, we will address a given economic, political, social, or moral situation based on the way it is defined and based on the way it is presented. So whatever level of struggle, or in Islam we say jihad, it requires to overcome that barrier or that opposition, then that's the means that you have to use. But once you overcome it, you have to stop at that point. Because if you don't stop at that point, then you become an oppressor and you also become violent, which he was opposed to. And he only spoke of armed struggle in self-defense. The incident that happened at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon was offense. And a lot of collateral damage was done. A lot of slaughter was done. That has nothing to do with Islam from Al-Hajj Malik al-Sabah's point of view. And if you read the life of the Prophet Muhammad from 610 to 632 and all the military campaigns that he mounted at Badr and at Uhud and Udaybah and in Medina and Mecca, he always said, you should fight soldiers, not women, not children. Don't kill in the cattle. Don't destroy farms. Soldiers fight soldiers. They don't involve innocent people in their conflict.
Dr. Baldwin, how would Dr. Martin Luther King see September 11th?
Well, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with what Dr. Al-Hadid said. I think both Malcolm and Martin would be very opposed to what happened. As Dr. Al-Hadid said, what happened has nothing to do with Islam. Obviously, Dr. King would have serious problems with it, with what happened. I also think he would have serious problems with the kind of response that the nation is implementing at this point. Dr. King always said you don't use military means to create community. And he would advocate diplomatic means, perhaps the use of economic sanctions, but you never resort to military means. So I think he would have a problem with the whole scenario, the way the thing is working out, in terms of what happened at the Trade Center and the Pentagon, and also what is happening in terms of the U.S. military response to that.
And of course, we're getting ready for our second commercial break. And when we come back, since we are dealing with the book, we want the two of you to give us some information relative to the book itself, that is the publication date and how it will be marketed, and some of your expectations in terms of this document. And so when we come back, we'll have about 6 minutes, I believe, to deal with that. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this short commercial break. Of course, gentlemen, before we had our